My name is Matthew Morin. I am a Senior Product Manager here at Cylance, primarily responsible for CylanceOPTICS, but get my hands in a little bit of everything going on the product side of the house. And today we're going to be talking about some of the recent releases that we've had within CylanceOPTICS towards the beginning of 2019 and the end of 2018. That mostly allows for some new automated workflows, some new integrations, and just to give you all a quick insight to kind of why we're building this and what you can do with the product with these new features. Of course, we do have the Q&A section in Zoom, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop anything in there, and we'll get to those at the end. So quick agenda, we'll go over CylanceOPTICS overview and refresher for those of you who may not be familiar with the product or are just seeing the product for the first time. Give you a quick high-level overview as to what the product is capable of, why we build it in the way that we do. We'll take a look at the features that kind of incorporate or are incorporated in the winter 2019 release. And then we'll go into a quick demo of the package playbooks feature, which is one of the features that we have in the winter 2019 release. Walk through a couple of use cases and how it ties into everything. And we'll also show off a couple of the other features that we have available with that. So just to kind of level set and understand where we are and what we see the problems as a company when we're building CylanceOPTICS. The EDR space is still an ever-evolving industry. It's a very interesting space in that the way that tactics are changing, the way that various security expertise is evolving in the industry, it makes it a really hard kind of moving target to hit from a vendor side as well as from a consumer side. I have a background in incident response. I used to be on our incident response team here at Cylance, and being able to build a tool that really starts narrowing down the data set. When we're dealing with EDR and we're dealing with incident response and forensics, there's such a wealth of data to look at, and it becomes really, really hard to kind of correlate that data, reduce it down into something that's really usable. So when we're building CylanceOPTICS, there's a few key areas that we're facing. The first is that really there's too many alerts and not enough time. Being able to build something that's very high fidelity, that's very easy to manage, just makes that process to actually operationalize this in an environment and use it on a day-to-day basis as one of our core tendencies here. It's also really hard to provide consistent visibility across the environment. So when we talk about a lot of these features, we are feature parity between Mac OS and Windows, and we'll eventually be with Linux in the future as we continue to develop that platform. But really what we're focusing on with this particular release is looking at how can we act as a force multiplier within an organization. Some organizations are understaffed or don't have enough security expertise within their programs or within their staff to sufficiently protect their assets. So what we're looking at here is how we can act as a force multiplier through automation to help bridge that gap between the need for people and the lack of people in an organization. At a high level, the way that we look at things here at Cylance is kind of a revolving door for artificial intelligence and machine learning. A lot of what we do is at the root is building things on top of machine learning and artificial intelligence to act as that force multiplier. There's a couple different ways that we can get into the automation. Have computers do the decisions for you. Computers are really, really good at math. If we can reduce these problems in these scenarios that we see for various attacks or suspicious endpoint activity, if we can reduce that down to a mathematical formula, that allows us to respond a lot faster than any human would be able to do. So there's a force multiplier there. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is access into the data in an automated or scriptable fashion, whether it's through Syslog messages, whether it's through APIs, or automated processes that we have on the endpoints. The important thing to remember, and one of the other areas that we focus with CylanceOPTICS, is that milliseconds matter. When you're dealing with scripted attacks or attacks that are, worming through a network, every millisecond and every second that you take to make a decision or respond to a threat matters. You can spread very, very rapidly through environments, and you can do a lot of damage to systems in a matter of seconds if you're taking the time to stream all of the events to a cloud, do that analysis in the cloud, and then respond back to those endpoints. With CylanceOPTICS, a lot of what we do is occurs locally at the endpoint without having to necessarily communicate with our cloud infrastructure, communicate to external servers. All of our response logic, all of our detection logic, whether it's the behavioral rules that customers are allowed to create, or if it's our machine learning models, all of it is stored locally on the endpoint, which allows the endpoints to make their own decisions and their own responses without having to actually communicate to a cloud. It all happens locally and is very, very fast, so you can actually prevent things from happening before they're able to do any damage to the systems. And we'll show what that looks like in the demo and what some of those response speeds actually look like. Again, everything is local on the endpoint. This data storage, the response logic, the detection logic, which really helps in not only protecting endpoints, but also helps with costs associated with the solution. Rather than having to stream everything to an on-premise server or storage solution that costs money and time to upkeep, or sending everything up to a cloud storage, the way with CylanceOPTICS, it allows us to distribute that load across already existing assets in your environment, as well as offload some of the processing and storage to our cloud as well, where we see fit for security relevant data or anything that needs some additional retention. Really just helps lower those costs, increase performance, and just make it an overall more robust solution. The way that we do this, of course, is really just funneling that data into something a little bit more relevant. Security relevant data only is what we call it. Rather than sending every single finite thing that happens on an endpoint up to the cloud or to an on-premise server and trying to analyze all that data, that gets really, really slow. It gets very expensive. It increases response time and just reduces the amount of kind of the speed that you actually get to respond to events. So the way that we do this is we just correlate things a little bit more intelligently locally on the endpoints, and then record that into our databases and do our analysis off of that. Makes things just that much easier to look through rather than having to sift through a giant pile of data and looking for kind of a needle in a pile of needles, for example. We actually just allow you to pick out a single needle and say, hey, this is something that's really interesting. This is something that you should look at, and this is the reason why. So again, just high level in terms of some of the capabilities that we have within the product. Distributed search and collection for whether it's for indicators of compromise or suspicious things that you may be wanting to look for in your environment. CylanceOPTICS does provide you the ability to go through and find any indicators, whether it's a process name, a file hash, a file name, across your endpoint, and can do that very, very rapidly. Cross-platform visibility, we do have feature parity between Mac OS and Windows. So anything that we do talk about in terms of APIs or scripting capabilities or detection logic is all cross-platform and available in Windows and Mac OS. We just recently released, and one of the reasons that we're having this webinar for the next 2 bullet points, API accessibility and Syslog integration. So we do have full API instrumentation for every single feature that is in CylanceOPTICS. So anything for those of you who are customers and operate in the console, any console-based workflow, anything that you have in the UI is also driven via an API. Super, super great use cases there. We'll talk about a couple of those further on. And the Syslog integration, we can actually stream detection events directly into any SIMs or logging mechanisms that you have. For example, we'll show off the Splunk app, the Cylance official Splunk app, which has been updated to include CylanceOPTICS detection events now, rather than just Cylance Protect events. Detection, of course, we have the context-driven detections that we provide to you that come from our threat research team. Customers have their own ability to interact directly with the same detection logic to create their own logic or modify our logic if they see fit. And we also have another project going on for those of you who have seen in the console, a project going on with our threat research team to continue to release additional rules that map to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. A really great framework that's out there, some really great contextual detection events that occur out of there. So that's an ongoing project that we have. So definitely take a look at that if you haven't. Some really great work going on there. And of course, the investigation and response side of things, root cause analysis, remote investigations, threat hunting. Playbooks is one of the new features that we'll be talking about today. It's really an exciting feature for those of you who've played around with the context analysis engine and package deployment. This kind of playbooks ties those two concepts together, and we'll show what that looks like. Again, just kind of high level architecturally, what this actually looks like is we store everything locally on the endpoints. So any data that we are collecting, whether it's a process start, a file create, a registry key modification, all that gets recorded locally into an encrypted database on each endpoint. Then from our cloud, with our proprietary communication protocol, we can actually communicate with all the endpoints very rapidly over a lightweight protocol. So we can say, hey, we're looking for this particular file hash, we're looking for this particular file name. Let's go out and query those endpoints, ask the endpoints to tell us what they know, and then send those and correlate that data back in the cloud so you can see everything. Happens super rapidly, super fast. And really, the reason why we do this is for a couple of reasons. One, it reduces the costs, as we were talking about before. No expensive storage solutions, no need to stream everything up to the cloud. It also really mitigates a lot of the data privacy concerns, especially for those of you who operate in privacy-sensitive environments or subject to GDPR regulations. This really helps kind of control that data. You can very easily control the access to that data and not necessarily stream everything up to us where you could be exposing sensitive information. So now that we have that covered, let's talk about the 2019 winter release, specifically Syslog integration, CylanceOPTICS APIs, and package playbooks. So with the Syslog integration, this is something that we've gotten a lot of requests for from our customers and partners. For those of you who are already using the Syslog feed integration with Cylance Protect, this configuration happens directly through that same interface. You have a new box in your Syslog feed called Optics Detections, or Optics Events rather, and that will allow you to basically, anytime that context analysis engine detection rule triggers, you can pipe that event directly over into that Syslog stream and then parse it out, whether you're putting into a Splunk or into any other log management solution. That'll all translate very nicely over into there. The reason for doing this, rather than having to just rely solely on the console workflows to actually view these detection events and view it through our UI, this allows you to basically just see a summary of events and create your own dashboards or pump it into your own kind of workflows that you may have currently built around Cylance Protect. Similar messaging formats, and it acts as a really nice correlation point. It also integrates really nicely with our APIs. So these Syslog messages come over. It includes any usernames associated with it, any device names, the associated artifacts, and actually a link back to the full detection events. So if you want to automate, pull those detection events in an automated fashion, allows you to do that pretty easily. Our Cylance Splunk app also already has this integration built in. So for those of you who are using the Cylance Splunk app, definitely keep an eye out for that. I'll show what it looks like and kind of show it in a quick demo after the next couple slides, but really excited to see that Syslog integration for those automated workflows. On the API side of things, this has been a huge project for us and really helps with a number of different workflows that we've been trying to build over the past couple of years. But just the best way to think about this is that everything that you know and see in the Cylance console or on the CylanceOPTICS side of the console is all driven via APIs on the back end. So anything that we have in the console is already driven via an API, which means that all of those workflows are exposed to the integrations tab or the integrations page. If you're familiar with API v2 or using the Cylance Protect APIs, these are all integrated directly into there now. So you can grant the same permissions on the optics side of the APIs. But anything that you can do in the console, you can do via the API. That includes requesting or viewing InstaQuery results, requesting and viewing focus views, updating context analysis engine rules or deleting them, changing your detection configurations across endpoints, sending device lockdown commands, retrieving arbitrary files from endpoints, executing package deployment jobs. All of those workflows that we have in the console are all driven via the APIs, so they're totally scriptable. Works really nice if you're working with like a Demisto or a Phantom or one of those orchestration tools. You can all kind of just pump data directly into optics. So for example, one of the workflows that we've been playing with kind of on the internal side of things at Cylance is actually using the optics APIs to take threat intelligence feeds that we're getting, whether it's hashes or file names or IP addresses, and throwing those in an automated fashion into InstaQuery, querying specific zones that we have, and then extracting that data out for any automated reporting that we may have to do. Works really, really nicely to actually, kind of see what feeds and what indicators are across your environment in an automated fashion. And then, of course, you can continue to build out workflows from there. If you wanted to say, hey, we have this very very suspicious indicator. If we see this on the endpoints in an automated manner, let's go and lock down that device for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. Just allows us, to build out those workflows and those playbooks, pretty easily through the APIs. And the final feature that we have coming out, or that we've released, is the package playbooks. So for those of you who are familiar and are current CylanceOPTICS customers, you're probably familiar with the context analysis engine, which is the detection engine that we have within CylanceOPTICS. Allows you to see malicious or suspicious endpoint activity, take response actions against that activity. You can terminate processes, things like that. That was introduced in version 2.1 and improved throughout the last two. And then in version 2.3, sometime around June of 2018, we introduced the package deploy feature, which is that endpoint scripting engine, that hardened Python interpreter that we put into each of our endpoints. And historically, those two have been kind of separate from each other. You have context analysis engine doing its thing, and then if you wanted to run scripts, you would have to kind of do that manually. Package playbooks ties those two features together so that if you have a detection event that occurs, you can automatically kick off a set of packages or a set of scripts to automatically execute on the endpoint. Whether it's collecting high-value forensic artifacts like registry hives or master file tables or something like that, you can do that automatically. You can do, you can execute in-house or third-party applications. So if you have a well-oiled incident response team and you have your own triage processes, you can use this to upload that package or that script into our console and then you can just automatically execute that package on the endpoints as soon as a detection event occurs. So it just helps drive that consistency and reduce that response time. Again, this logic is stored locally on the endpoints, so it doesn't, it can occur whether or not you have a connection to our cloud services. It'll execute pretty much instantly as soon as that detection event occurs. So you get that forensic information, or you get that scripting capability almost as soon as that event occurs on the endpoints. And we'll show what this looks like. It's actually really interesting when you start building this out. But there's some really interesting workflows that you can build out of this. And again, the goal behind this is to reduce the amount of human interaction to collect data, or to run scripts, or to respond to threats, acting as that force multiplier where you don't have to have someone sitting there clicking buttons every time that a detection event occurs or any time that something weird happens. You can have the endpoints make their own decisions for themselves. And then if there is something that comes of that event, or you are doing that investigation, or you do get those alerts where something requires your attention, you have a set of data sitting there waiting for you. You have that confidence that we ran a set of scripts and we collected a set of data for you that you can then, kind of investigate and go down your investigation paths. So with that, we are going to jump into a couple quick demos. We'll show off the Splunk application for the Cylance official Splunk app, and then we'll jump into a couple of the package playbook workflows. Again, if you have any questions or anything like that, drop them in the Q&A section, and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Alrighty, and we'll switch over to here. So again, this is our Cylance Splunk app. For those of you who are using it, you're probably familiar with this. And if you are not, if you've never seen it, welcome to the Cylance Splunk app. So historically, we've had the Threat Center, the Protection Center, searches and reports and tools and whatnot. But shoved in here, we also have this new Optics tab. Clicking on this, you can jump right into an overview. And the way that this is broken down, we break it down in a couple different ways. The first, going across the top, is when we're looking at context analysis engine, and we're actually looking at the events that are coming up from CylanceOPTICS, we break it down into kind of 5 main artifacts, or 5 main events. File events, process events, memory events, which are kind of rare and happen mostly on Mac OS, but they are there, network events, and registry events. These are the same kind of 5 core artifacts that we have in the product when you're doing insta queries or focus views and detection events. These are the main areas that we're looking at with the product. These are what we're keeping tabs on and can alert on. So going across here, you can always dive into, kind of drill into each of the process events and kind of see what each of these are looking like. You get your time, the tenant that it came from, you get your event type, severity, device name, descriptions, everything like that. Notice that we don't send up the entire detection event that you would see in the console. That's just because we are limited by Syslog's kind of requirements, where you can't send all the data up. We have to stay within its kind of RFC guidelines and the actual spec for it. But what we do send up is the actual detection event. So if you do see something weird going on, you can always drill into that detection event in the console, or you can pull it via the API into another processing tool if you wanted to. This also allows us to do some other, kind of event aggregation and some different metrics that we don't currently have in the console. You can see a breakdown of the number of events by type. You can see the severities. Of course, you can always drill into these just by clicking on it. And you can also see all of the zones that are associated with each of those detection events. So for example, this Windows 10 kind of zone over here has a very significant number of events occurring in the environment. Maybe that could be an indicator that you want to take a look at what's going on. Just additional aggregations. This is all available in the Cylance Protect or the Cylance official Splunk app. Super handy for anything that you might want to be looking at. Again, you can always drill into events from here as well and kind of see what's going on. Configuration-wise, this happens in your settings page. So if you navigate over to settings, and I'm on a remote connection, so this might take a second to load. This is available in your syslog/sim. And then you have this new optics events checkbox right here. Some of you will probably not have this checked. It's not checked by default for current tenants. So if you had Syslog enabled before, and you're either a new CylanceOPTICS customer or you're a new CylanceOPTICS customer, or you haven't seen this before, you can actually just go and check this box, and that will basically just tie those syslog streams together, and it'll come over that same pipe. So no additional configuration needed or anything like that. And for anybody who thinks that they're being slick and screenshotting this token, go for it, because I'm regenerating it after, and so try your best. All right. Let's see. I think that's about all on the Syslog side of things. Again, this is free and available to check out for anybody who is using the Syslog side of things. So definitely recommend checking it out. All right, now moving over to package playbooks. So again, package playbooks allow us to take the same idea that we have with the packages or the package deploy. Again, for those of you who haven't seen it before, package deploy allows you to interact with the hardened Python interpreter on the endpoints to run arbitrary scripts, executables, basically anything you'd be interacting with a Python interpreter for, collecting forensic artifacts. When we originally designed this feature, we wanted it to be something for forensic artifact collection. It was designed to just say, okay, well, let's use it to grab, let's see if we can filter this down real quick. Let's use it to grab things like the master file tables, or let's use it to grab registry hives, program execution records. But as we started talking with some of our customers and some of our partners, we realized that there's a lot of other capabilities that we can access out of this capability. Things around like software compliance, or just application deployment, application uninstalling, things like that. So we have a number of packages that are under development for general system audits, system configuration pulls, things like that. If there's any data that you want to pull into any automated processing, you can use this framework to ship data around from your endpoints up into a storage location. So the cool thing about this is you don't have to necessarily send this data up to our cloud console. You can send this data retrieved from the scripts to an SFTP server. You can send it to an Amazon S3 bucket. You can send it to an SMB server on your network. It basically just allows you to correlate that data or collect that data in a central location. And of course, with context analysis engine, this allows us, when we start tying it together as a playbook, it allows us to automatically execute a series of these packages. So for those of you who are CylanceOPTICS customers, if you go into your configurations and then click on package playbooks, this will allow you to create a playbook or edit any of the current playbooks that you have in the console. We don't provide any by default, but they're super easy to create. You can just click here, you can give it a name, a description. It's like your collection point. If you want to send to an SFTP server, you just put in the credentials to authenticate to it. SMB server or S3 are all there, or you can keep results locally on each endpoint if you want to go and retrieve it at a later time. And then you select the packages that you want to execute. So for example, if we look at, let's just grab this phase 1 triage. This one, for example, if we were an incident responder and we said anytime that we have a specific set of detection events that occur, let's go and execute, and let's go and collect our host file, our application log, and run an auto run sweep, and then send the results to an SMB server. So we set our collection point to SMB, provide the path and location, any passwords or strings to authenticate to it. And then let's change around a couple of these. So this is saying anytime that this playbook runs, we're going to run these particular scripts. We're going to do program execution records. Hover over this and it gives you a quick description of what that actually means. In this case, we're collecting the prefetch, shim cache, AM cache, and recent file cache artifacts. We'll collect all of our Windows event logs. And then let's run, let's see what else do we have here. Do I have an auto runs in here? I might not have that one. That's fine. We'll just run these two. So we'll save that configuration. And then the way that you get these to execute, again, is associating it to a detection rule set. So you go to configurations, detection rule sets, click your edit button. And then you have a new column. Before we just had exceptions and response actions, we now have a playbooks column here. So let's grab, for example, the Office DDE to script interpreter rule that maps to the MITRE framework. Turn that rule on, turn on an endpoint notification. We'll set a response action to terminate processes just because we can. Then playbooks, you can select any playbook that you want. You can select up to 10 different playbooks per rule, per detection rule set. So if I wanted to run all of these playbooks when this detection event occurs, I could. And again, these are configured on a per detection rule basis. So for example, if I wanted to turn on this account discovery rule and not have any playbooks triggered, but still take a response action, I can do that as well. So it's not just one playbook per detection rule set. It's configurable per detection rule in your rule set. It allows it to be super, super flexible for various teams that you may have in your organization. We'll confirm, send this down to our endpoint. Remember, so we're going to trigger that rule, and we should see the program execution records run. We should collect our Windows event logs, and it's going to go to this, this SMB server that we have. So this SMB server is sitting here on my endpoint. See upload investigation, that same path that we had before. Nothing in there right now. And we're going to switch over to this system. And we're going to trigger off just an Office DDE rule. So we'll trigger off that rule. We should see it terminate our process, and we'll collect that information and send it automatically over to that SMB server. And click through, yes, everything's fine. I just want to know how to make money with Bitcoin. So we get that terminate action. So we saw CylanceOPTICS say, hey, something weird happened here. Again, this is totally customizable. You don't have to show that detection notification, but we did take actions against that, Word document. Flip over to the console. See our detection event sent up over here. Says, okay, hey, something weird happened. And then we should have over on our SMB server, that's how fast this is executing. So this just, we saw that trigger maybe 30 seconds ago. That's how fast we're able to execute that response action, run those scripts, and then send that data off to that central location. That's pretty much at the same time that the response action is occurring and that detection event is occurring, that we're able to go and send this data and collect it. So that would happen for any scripts that you may want to package into there, any additional data that you want to collect. And then we get just our raw data that we're collecting. So in this case, we have some of the prefetch files, AM cache, shim cache, and some other kind of forensic artifacts in there. And then we also get our Windows event logs all ready for our analysis. This works really great if you wanted to pump it into an automated processing, if you have any like a Palazzo or Log Timeline or Time Sketch or something, an instance like that set up, you can pump all these directly into that and start doing timelining there if you wanted to. If you're taking, kind of response actions and running your own scripts, you could easily import those into the platform so you can then execute it on your own. One of the other cool things that this allows us to do that we're starting to explore is not necessarily threat detection and prevention, but system configuration and kind of compliance violations. So for example, let's say we have Java running on this system. Let's do a quick install real quick. But let's say we have Java running and we don't want Java running in our environment. We said, too risky, we don't need it, there's not a business use case for us. Let's make sure that we don't have it running anywhere in our environment. So this is going to go through and do its install real quick. And what I'm going to do is flip back to our console and change our configuration around. So what we're going to do is, we can keep that rule on, doesn't really matter. And what we have is a detection rule. This is just a custom one that we created, but we created a custom rule that will look for Java clients that are running on endpoints. And it's just an informational rule. We don't have to associate any response actions or anything with it. We can if we want to. But this is just being used as an informational thing to say, hey, you know what? Java is running on this endpoint, and we want to let you know about it. And we're also going to take a playbook that is called uninstall Java. And I'll show you what that playbook is actually looking like. So when this detection event occurs, when we see Java running, we're going to take an action to actually go and uninstall Java from that endpoint. So we'll save that, flip into our playbooks real quick, and I'll show you what this Java playbook looks like. So name, description, setting it to a local collection. Next. This we're using a package that we've been working on. It's not quite ready for prime time, but kind of giving you a sneak peek of some of the stuff that we have working in the background. But we're a package called software uninstall. Just looks through the registry and attempts to uninstall software. We're going to point it, tell it to look for Java, and we're going to run with a quiet uninstall and not require a restart. So we should have Java installed. And actually, let's make sure I had a notification set on this, just so we can see that. There we go. Save. And the other cool thing about this is kind of going over our real-time communication channel to the endpoints. So anytime I click that save button, anytime that I update these configurations, it gets communicated down to the endpoint pretty much instantly. So we have Java here. And if we actually just launch this, we should trigger that rule and then prompt it to uninstall us. Yep, so we see this alert triggered off, and then we should actually kick off an uninstall process in a couple of seconds. And watch us see this close out. Assuming that I configured it correctly. Let's see. Maybe I didn't pray to the live demo gods enough to actually do it. Didn't totally test this out before we actually ran it. So we didn't actually close that out, but we did uninstall Java successfully. We're actually looking here. So we have that set up still. Check out our add remove programs. Oops. So we actually we're able to uninstall Java there. In the UI, we get a little notification, detection event, and we see we had our detection event occur. We see the associated processes with it. We get a little feedback that says, hey, we successfully initialized the playbook, uninstalled Java. And then, if we kept on seeing this detection event running, we know that there's either, still some other Java clients that are sitting on there, or, some investigations that we'd have to do. But in this case, we can actually take a look at that endpoint right here. We do see that Java did get uninstalled from the system. So just another interesting use case. It's not necessarily a threat detection and prevention side of things, but it's also a great way to do kind of software compliance and remediation. So that's the winter release. Again, APIs. Actually, I'll show what the APIs look like as well. These are found in your integrations tab, same way that you have your CylanceOPTICS or your Cylance Protect APIs. And then you get all of these great new features down here: focus views, insta queries, detection rule sets, device commands, exceptions, policies, rules, detections, all of that's available to you through the integrations tab. So you can drive every single one of these workflows that are found in the UI via the API. So super excited about that. Check out the Cylance Protect Splunk app with the new optics integration, and also check out any of those new event messages. For those of you who are customers, I don't know if we have people who aren't customers on here. Check out the support portal for any of the documentation around the Syslog, API, packages, and package playbooks. All the documentation should be up there for you. And it looks like we have a couple questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to switch over to those. Feel free to keep on dumping stuff into there. If you're not interested in questions, then thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. But let's switch over to some questions. Is there any chance to see Syslog integrations with QRadar? I believe we've been in discussions with them. I'll have to follow up with you on that one. But I believe we are in talks with them. There's another PM who handles the integration side of things in those partnerships, but I'll make sure that we grab that as a follow-up item. Let's see, any chance to have all those packages available for partners? Yeah, so a lot of the packages, this is one of our staging and demo environments where we stage some of our testing pieces. So we're not ready to release all those packages yet. Very similar to when we release context analysis engine rules, it's all just content for the endpoint. So when we do release additional rules and when we do release additional packages, it doesn't require an endpoint update. We'll basically drop them into the consoles for everybody, send out a notification through the KB article and through the support portal. So as we start getting closer to releasing those and we wrap up some of the testing, we'll definitely send out communications. So definitely keep your eyes out for those. Software uninstall package, that's still very much in development. There's a question about showing some of the details around that. The software uninstall package basically is a script that looks for the uninstall strings found in the registry, and then we'll actually go and attempt to run that uninstall string. So it works pretty generically across anything for if you want to do like uninstall Dropbox, things of that nature. This is all very much under development right now. Again, as we move closer to the release of it, I'll definitely send out communications around it. When will this functionality be enabled in tenants? This functionality should all be enabled in the tenants. If it's not, just submit a request to Cylance support and just request that Syslog, API v2, and package playbooks are enabled in your tenant. They should be able to get that enabled for you. This is all general availability, so there's, feel free to start using it with the exception of some of these packages that we're talking about, but package playbooks and everything like that, APIs and Syslog, that's all general availability. So some of these optics rules are, again, custom rules for us that I use for testing in here. So some of the rules that you're seeing in here, for example, are not things that you would actually want to be running in your production environments. I think there's one that flags anytime that we have an IP address that shows up. A lot of these other ones, like the PowerShell download, these are just renamed versions of current rules. So a lot of these rules, like, you wouldn't actually even want running in your environment. There should be, you actually probably have more rules in your production tenant than this one does, especially when it comes to the MITRE ATT&CK rules. I believe we have 69 or so of those out there. So definitely keep an eye out though for there. If you haven't taken a look at your detection rule sets lately, there should be about 69 rules in there. And the documentation for those should be on the support site. If you type in CylanceOPTICS rules, that should populate into all the rules that we have and when they were released. How to be early adopter of those features, rules, and packages. Send me, I'll follow up with you on that one. We haven't really worked out a process for early adopters for rules and packages quite yet, just because it is content, so we can release it super rapidly. But if you're interested, I can definitely get in touch with you. The question, this next question, is basically around whether or not how we're going to handle, kind of modifications of rules, and, just making them more high fidelity or addressing false positives or any other new scenarios. So yeah, the cool thing about these, again, is it's all just content for us. So as we've been getting some new threat research processes in place with our threat research team. For those of you who are CylancePROTECT customers, they're the people behind the malware analysts and the malware analysis. So we have a group of them that are focused on optics, behavioral rule, and machine learning research. So anytime that we do have changing situations or new and novel techniques, they jump right on that to release new rules as quick as possible. If you ever do find a significant miss or something that you think that should be kind of more broadly, kind of more narrowly scoped or broadly scoped on particular detection rules, just open a support ticket, and they'll know where to direct that internally. They'll probably ask for a couple more details here and there, but generally the support team and the support portal can direct that directly over to those teams. So if you ever do have feedback around rules and content, support is the best way to go for now. We are working on a community portal for detection rules and packages so that anybody, any of our customers can interact with each other and with some Cylance employees around, what works really well for some of their packages, what doesn't work well. People can share out information if they want to. I don't have an accurate ETA on that, but it is something that we are working on putting together. So definitely keep an eye out for that, for those of you who are interested in sharing around some of that stuff. The Unified Protect and Optics agent, will be doing a larger announcement at RSA. Unfortunately, I can't spoil the news on here because that would kind of take all the air out of stuff going on with RSA. But right around RSA, we should be having more communications and announcements around that. So if you're at RSA, I'm sure Shirley's going to be talking about this as well at the end of the webinar, but feel free to stop by the booth. I'll be there. Come say hi. We have some great news and some cool things to show off. But yeah, for the Unified Protection Optics agent, we'll be doing some more announcements around RSA.
Hey, Matt, there's one more question that came in, and that is, and I may have missed this, is do I have to change my license to get these features if I'm a current customer?
Right. So if you are a current CylanceOPTICS customer, you do not have to change your license to get these features. All the features that we do release with CylanceOPTICS are under that same license. So context analysis engine, machine learning rules, package deploy, package playbooks are all part of the same license. If you see anything in here that you don't have in your tenant, send in a support ticket or get in touch with your sales rep. And they should be able to point you in the right direction towards getting that stuff enabled. If you're a CylancePROTECT customer and you want to see all these optics features, definitely get in touch with your sales reps. Ask for an optics proof of concept. They should be able to walk you through some of the testing scenarios and some deeper demos around what we're actually capable in the product. in terms of threat hunting and root cause analysis and things of that nature. So yeah, if you're an optics customer, all of this is yours, and just make sure it's enabled.
And one more question is, how does Cylance Optics work in conjunction with Cylance Protect?
That's a great one. So CylanceOPTICS and Cylance Protect, you know, as much as some people would like to think that AV and EDR are two conflicting controls, they're actually very complementary to one another. Cylance Protect is really, really good at, the way that I think about it is Cylance Protect is good at looking at content. It looks at the content of a binary and determines whether or not that's malicious or suspicious, and then stops it from executing. And that's really oversimplifying what Protect does. But at its core, breaking it down to the absolute minimum that it does that very, very well. It stops malware by looking at the content of files. Optics kind of overlays that and looks at the context of what's happening on a system. So Protect looks at a single file on a single endpoint at a single point in time and stops bad stuff from happening. Optics looks at the context of what's happening over the course of time on a system. So you start gathering this slightly larger area of analysis, if you will, to determine not just what a binary is doing on a system, but what a process is doing overall. What files is it creating? What registry keys is it modifying? What network connections is it creating? The users that are associated with that, the files that are associated with it. It allows you to see a larger scope of what's happening, which is really what the point of EDR is to see contextually what is occurring on a system across your environment. We just do it a little bit differently, again, with that local response, with those local response actions and that local detection logic. We kind of mimic what we set out to accomplish with Cylance Protect, which is actually stopping the bad stuff from happening before it can do damage, rather than saying, hey, I saw this Office document spawn command, which then spawned PowerShell, which then downloaded a file. Maybe you should know about that. Sorry, it already executed. Okay, fine. We can operate in that manner, but the real power from it comes by operating very, very fast and taking those response actions and taking that local response to terminate that malicious action before it does anything to the system. And as we start moving toward the unified agent, again, more announcements towards RSA. As we start moving towards that unified agent, those ties are going to get more and more close to each other. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We're super excited.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for walking through the CylanceOPTICS updates and demos. And for the folks going to RSA, as Matt mentioned, definitely visit us at booth 6145 in the North Hall and connect with Matt as he's heading up our new demos. Plus, we have a handful of speaking events, and also join Stuart McClure in a live Hacking Exposed session. And join us on February 28th because of the fact that we are having a webinar specifically on RSA and a sneak peek of what Cylance will be doing. Thank you for spending time with us today. And if you want to visit us, our future webinars, topics, and on demand, visit us at cylance.com/webinars. Thank you so much, and thanks again, Matt.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for spending time with us today.